of Trump's latest tariff salvo. First, let's listen into what US President Donald Trump exactly said before we go to our guests.
Tell me about India. Why is India not allowed to do that? They have to pay tariffs. Do they have an exemption on rice?
No, sir. We're still working on their trade deal. So
Yeah, but they should be dumping. I mean, I heard that from others. So you can't do that.
There's a WTO case against India.
Give me the
now.
give me the countries if you could. Go ahead. India. Who else?
So
Walk it
India,
down. Which is good.
yes, sir.
India, Thailand, China into Puerto Rico, not into the continental U.S., but into Puerto Rico. Those are the main culprits.
So Puerto Rico used to do a lot of business.
All right, so those were Trump's comments coming in a day before fresh talks start with the US. Now we're joined by Ajay Sahai, who's the DG and CEO, Federation of Indian Export Organization, who's joining us. Hi, good evening to you, Mr. Sahai, and thank you so much for taking the time out and joining us today, Nitina. Mr. Sahai, Trump's fresh comments on tariff on Indian rice exports comes as both sides are preparing for another round of talks tomorrow. Is this a pressure technique to tilt the discussion in US's favor? And how does one read into these comments that come just a day prior we resume our bilateral trade talks with US?
I think these are the pressure tactics which is being adopted by the US. Indian rice is quite competitive, while on the Basmati, we have the competition from Pakistan, which is paying duty of 19%. We are paying 50% duty. If you're looking into non-Basmati rice, our competition is from Thailand, Vietnam, who are paying 20% duty. The Indian exporters are paying 50% duty. So it's not the case that Indian exporters are dumping. There is definitely demand for the Indian rice. There is a huge diaspora of Indians in the US. The demand is continuing. A lot of rice which is being exported is being used in South Indian dishes also. So I don't think this is something where a dumping is actually taking place. He's little worried that despite having a high duty, Indian rice is competitive in the US market. That is his more concern.
Mr. Sahai, these Trump's fresh tariffs on Indian rice puts at risk nearly 2.5 lakh tons of annual export worth over 3,100 crores. India also ships $300 million of basmati to US, like you mentioned, and any tariff shock could actually trigger some major price trade and state-level disruptions here.
I think he has to be conscious of the fact that the major burden of the tariff is being borne by the US consumer. In fact, a study has come that prior to the tariff, the US consumer were bearing around 14% of the tariff. But now, after the tariff increase, 55% of the burden is being borne by the US consumer. So, if he is attacking something which is staple diet also for a large section of the US population, it will trigger the inflation into the country. He has to be a little conscious of the fact. I've been given to understand that a lot of exporter of the rice, they feel that probably little increase in the tariff on the rice may not impact them. If he increases the tariff to an abnormal level of 100 or 200%, that may be the other case, because despite having a tariff differential of 30%, we are getting a good market for the Indian rice in US.
Okay. So, Mrs. Sahai, what are your expectations from the trade talks that begin tomorrow? What could be on the table? Now, agriculture is, of course, a key point, but what are the things that you're expecting from tomorrow's meeting?
What we've been given to understand that probably the negotiation is more or less complete. A call has to be taken. I'm not sure what exactly is for the discussion with the new team which has come. The short point which we are making is that probably the export numbers are not reflecting the actual challenge which is being faced by the export sector. A lot of exporters are now exporting to the US at a loss. They are absorbing the tariff hike to the extent of 25 to 30%. Hope that once India will have the BTA, they will be able to gain and they may be able to offset the losses. The important point for them is to somehow retain the customer. Because if the customer moves to some other country, even when the BTA is in place, probably we will not be able to get the businesses. So the priority is very clear for the Indian exporter, but please bear in mind that there is limit to which they can take these kinds of call. And if the BTA is not concluded in next couple of months, probably it will be very difficult for them to retain the bar, which right now they are doing, even taking in cost to themselves.
Absolutely, Mr. Sai. In fact, you mentioned about the interest of the exporters. In fact, India's trade deficit has widened to an all-time high. We're sitting at a $41 billion of trade deficit, and India's export itself has fallen 12% on the back of higher tariffs. What happens to India's trade deficit, post, the outcome of tariff comes out, because we already see a all-time high trade deficit that we are faced with?
In fact, trade deficit is largely on account of the fact that probably the Indian manufacturing is not competitive. In number of segments, we are expanding, and that's why large imports are happening. Some of the sectors, for example, in a smartphone, we are making a lot of export parts and components are getting imported, and that may be doing that. I'm pretty sure the number for the month of November may be a little more encouraging than the number for the month of October. But the short point which we are making is that if we are able to get a breakthrough in the BTA with the US in next few months' time, we will see huge increase in our export to the US. The good thing is that as of now, we have little inventory left in the US, and that's why if the BTA happens quickly, we will continue from that position. The encouraging thing is that probably since the Indian exporters have taken the hit and they have continued business, once the BTA happens, the business will come back to India.
Okay. Mr. Sai, also you mentioned how the exporters are so far absorbing the costs. Is it time that India really starts looking for other export partners? Because we saw that with Russia, we have sent out a really strong message there. India should be now looking out for other export partners, because, you are on a shaky ground with US, and it's likely to continue perhaps with Donald Trump being in power, and the kind of volatility, he really, the kind of shockwaves he's been sending on account of tariffs. So really, is this the time that India should really look out for other export partners as well?
I personally feel that the only positive outcome of the tariff war is that it has forced the industry to look for the alternative market, as Indian exporters were quite comfortable in the US market. And now in the given situation, they have realized that probably they need to diversify, they need to risk. They are looking into the alternative market. Government is also providing them support by going for the FTA, new FTA strategy, where they are very aggressive in number of market. Because if you have the FTA, you are either competing at the equal level with the FTA partner, or you are having an upper hand in the market. And I'm pretty sure the market access support, which is now being announced by government, will be very soon will be rolled in also. That will encourage Indian exporter to look for the alternative market. Please bear in mind that diversification is little time consuming process, but I'm pretty sure that the FTA strategy coupled with aggressive marketing will encourage Indian exporter to go for the alternative markets.
Let me also get on board Professor Madhav Nalapat, who's the Vice Chair of Manipal Advanced Research Group, who's joining us. Hi, Mr. Nalapat, Professor Nalapat, thank you so much for taking the time out and joining us. Mr. Nalapat, Mr. Sahai was just mentioning how the only good thing, the only good outcome of this entire trade war has been the fact that we have started looking out for other export partners, because we were way too comfortable in the US market. Talk to us about how India is positioned vis-a-vis other exporters, because we of course captured a huge market in the US. Our major exports went to the US market, and now we are left to look out at other alternatives.
Look, there's no doubt about that. There's no question about that. President Trump is using pressure tactics on India. Frankly, the problem with President Trump is he's not the President Trump of even of the beginning of his term. He's certainly not the President Trump in his first term. If you look at the new national security policy in this Trump 2.0, it's totally different from the national security policy of Trump 1.0. The 1.0 clearly identifies China as the main strategic threat and India as a very good partner. And this particular so-called security policy is actually a policy to breed insecurity in the United States because it is calling China a near peer. That's the whole problem. If China becomes a peer and overtakes the US, what happens to the US dollar? What happens to confidence in the United States? What happens to the US economy? So quite frankly, what's happening in the White House is now a black box. But I think, in my personal view, it can't last so very long. Republicans are suffering very, very badly as a consequence of this. They don't want to go into a complete crash in the next year's midterms. So I do believe that the Republicans will take corrective action, and I think, frankly, the representatives, House of Representatives, the Senate will need to take some corrective action because you can't blindly follow President Trump. He has lost his compass. He had a very clear, straight compass, and that was leading him the right direction. Now that compass has gone somewhere. We don't know where, but it's going haywire. He's veering off in all directions, and is now against India. India is actually, along with Japan, a very, very important strategic partner of the United States. And he is now basically, Japan is now facing the threat from China, an open threat. The Chinese are locking their fighter jet radar on Japanese jets. They're doing all kinds of intimidatory tactics. And to add that, you've got Donald Trump demanding that they do this and that, and they pay more. Well, the question is, what are they paying? You're using that money for? They're using that money for to protect the United States because China is a threat to the United States as well. India is doing so much on the border to protect the United States also from the threat of China. And he's going after Japan, he's going after India. Today I saw that, according to some farmer, anonymous chap who has been brought to the White House, and Scott Besser, the Commerce Secretary, like a good stenographer, has been ordered by President Trump to write down who are the main enemies of the United States. First is, of course, India, believe it or not. Then comes, believe it or not, Thailand. And only then, after that, comes comes China. Now, frankly, it is unbelievable. You have Thailand, and you're taking the word of some quote unquote farmer. Heaven knows that person is a farmer. He may be a frame up. The fact of the matter is, it would appear that in the past Trump was called the Russian candidate. He was he was openly called that by Hillary Clinton in their famous debate, that you are a Russian stooge. And he was so shocked. For some time, he was silent. I mean, that's very unusual for Trump. Today, he may be called the Manchurian candidate, the Chinese candidate. Now, the man was very straight on China, but within a few months, something seems to happen to him. And I think I know what's happened to him. The huge amounts of money that are being funneled into people close to Donald Trump. The Chinese did not expect him to win last time. They made up for lost time, but the fact is that Trump's compass was in the right direction. Today, you look at Trump's, you look at his vice president, you look at J.D. Vance, look at the Secretary of State. Look at Marco Rubio, Secretary of State. Look at Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard. Look at even at somebody outside the cabinet, his elder son Don Jr., a wonderful compass, and their compass seems to be still working. So the fact of the matter is, as soon as possible, they had better put Trump back on his original path and give him back the compass he seems to have lost. Otherwise, I can tell you, it's bad luck for the US, bad luck for the Republicans, bad luck and definitely not good news for India. It's very inexplicable, the fact that India has been treated, Japan has been treated, to some extent, the EU is being treated as an enemy.
Yeah.
And the China, he's being very, very nice
Right.
on China.
Right.
Near peer, he's calling it, a near peer. Well, I mean, that's precisely the problem. That's
Right.
what some
Pro-
warning about for so many years.
Right, Professor Nalapat, point taken. Sorry for interjecting, but Mr. Sahai, let me come to you. Professor Nalapat said, Donald Trump has lost his compass. Do you concur? Because, if not for anything else, these tariffs are going to have implications on the U.S. citizens itself, because the costs are going to get passed on to the U.S. citizens. They are going to pay the price for these higher tariffs, and therefore giving rise to higher inflation.
He is proceeding on the assumption that whatever little sufferance is for the US consumer, he will be collecting very high amount of import tariff and give them concession on the income tax across the board. I'm not sure on what basis he has done his mathematics, but probably that will not work out. Secondly, the cost for the US industry, particularly downstream industry, is going haywire. They are not at all competitive. So while imposing the tariff on steel, he may be able to save one or two steel industry in the US, but at the cost of huge jobs which are being created in automobile, auto component, and other engineering sector. So I will not say what exactly is driving him, but probably in the long run, his calculation will go haywire, and this is a cost probably which the US as a country will pay.
On that note, Mr. Sahai and Professor Nalapat, thank you so much for taking the time out and joining us and weighing in on this. And tomorrow, of course, we have another fresh round of bilateral trade talks that will begin between India and US. So we will be getting all the updates, and we'll be watching out for that very, very closely. But with that, it's time for us to slip into a short break. Don't go anywhere. After the break, we'll get you more updates. Stay tuned.